Welcome back to another pre-entry preview, which is, I think, the name we landed on for these. And I got my friend Barry Spears here. Barry, I think this is the first time that you've been able to do anything on the wrong lead. So I thank you for taking time off of your busy day and probably preparing for what's going to be a very busy week with our friend Chase over at the Notorious OTB. So I know you guys have been pumping out a lot of content there, but welcome, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Definitely follow you guys a lot and enjoy your opinions on the races. So it's definitely an honor to be on your show now.
Yeah, it's crazy that it's taken this long to get you. And then I remember like we've done stuff with like Gino and maybe
Hmm.
with just there's been other stuff where we've kind of crossed back and forth. But it's good to finally have you on our channel. And I think I pulled you in for a tough one, which is the Breeders' Cup Turf here. Obviously, we'll be going a mile and a half here at Del Mar. And we were looking a little bit ahead of time. European dominated since Bricks and Mortar in 2019, and he was just a different horse that year. But I don't know, Barry. I'm looking at the American horses in this race, and I think they're fighting a very, very uphill battle this year. I was looking overseas, and I believe Farbridge at 10-1 is the shortest priced American horse, and I'm not entirely sure if Farbridge like even hits a trifecta in this race. I mean, this is
Oof.
a very, very tough race.
Yeah, I tend to agree. The Americans are really up against it in this race. Although I will say it's kind of interesting that you say Farbridge is probably the most bet American horse at this point. I thought Cabo Spirit was actually the one with probably the best shot just because of the race dynamics. There's versions of this race where that horse could kind of get loose, like he did the last time in the John Henry Turf Cup, and kind of just dictate terms, and everybody falls asleep, and this horse wins. That's what I think is probably the best chance for the Americans, because finishing, I don't think anybody can outfinish the Europeans.
Yeah, and that was actually what funny enough, that was actually one of the horses that we gave out on a stream. There was Cabo Spirit, and he ends up going wire to wire at a really really big price, 25-1. I think there's some questions with Cabo Spirit just because I don't think he's gone this long yet, but I think he, like you said, depending on what happens on the front end, he can be very dangerous. I will say though, we have a bunch of Aiden O'Brien horses, and if there's one thing Aiden loves to do, is he loves to use a rabbit.
Rabbits.
So I find it. I find it kind of hard to think that there's not going to be enough pace for some of these horses closing. Um, I actually don't hate it. I thought Cabo Spirit, on Brisnet, he looks relatively slow. But if you look at other figures, I know, for example, on Time Form, they gave him a 121 last time, and that 121, it puts him in the conversation. I still
Mm.
think you probably need about a 130 on the Time Form scale to win this race, if I had to guess. And of the Americans, really the only one that's kind of been close to that is Farbridge, as of late. And there's always the little bit that you kind of lose in translation from overseas to here. We've talked about time form fix for these international horses a little bit when we talk about the BC mile, but in talking with Mark Capitan, who is a just speed figure junkie, he thinks that normally there's a couple of points you kind of gotta adjust up. It's not the same as like time form international to time form US, but he thinks that there is a little bit. I know Craig probably tries to keep it as fair as possible, but at least in the past, we've seen these horses definitely run a little bit faster from their figures overseas. Um, but the morning line favorite overseas at 5-2 is actually Rebels Romance. That's what I'm seeing right now on overseas books. Obviously, it's tough with these races because I always think that we get biases with overseas horses, obviously overseas, are going to be much shorter because they think they have the best horses, and then all of a sudden they come here and some Chad Brown horse takes a ton of money because everyone knows Chad Brown here in North America. So, but Rebels Romance is he's won the BC Turf 2 years ago. So definitely very, very accomplished. Has won here. Came back for a couple of races and before last year's Breeders' Cup, and I don't know if something went wrong, and he ended up not running. But that Breeders' Cup turf at Keeneland, I mean, definitely fits right here. I think is probably the horse to beat. I know you're a fan of the no chalk zone, but are you going to be on the chalk here in this race?
Probably not. I find that in a lot of these races, you'll see these Europeans kind of flood races like this, and they're kind of all familiar with each other, and they beat each other a lot.
Hmm.
So I think sometimes what happens is as the Americans go in the betting pools here, people kind of gravitate to horses they've heard of, not necessarily the horses that they didn't hear of coming from overseas. And although those horses have been really, really competitive, they just didn't win over there. But somehow, some way, they come here, somehow get a better trip and beat the really big named horse. And I think we got a little of that going on in this race, where you have horses that have been really competitive in other places. Like Roshan Park is a horse that really, really interests me. Um, you can see in this horse's form that he's been better on firm ground, which he obviously will get uh, on Saturday. So, being able to finish and kind of put together a race is tough when you see these foreign lines. And even if you go through the replays, they don't really run races the same way they do here. So you kind of have to account for that a little bit too. But I think this horse is really competitive in this spot. A horse like last year, who I thought should have won, Shariar, I think you say it.
Hmm.
But um, that horse basically followed August Rodin uh, to a third place finish and had the jump on that horse, but didn't take the rail. And kind of that sort of trip ended up being the difference between that horse winning and finishing third. Um, you know, all things considered, with post position, that really will make a lot of the difference here, in how this race might shape up and who does what.
Yeah, no, and Shariar is definitely one that I have written down as a horse I'm interested in. 12-1 currently overseas, and yeah, that Santa Anita effort, 126 time form, and you guys hear me talking about time form figs a lot, and I don't know how much if you haven't watched a lot of our content. I am a very big proponent of time form figures when it comes to turf racing. I think they are the best. If you were
Superior.
if you were to
I
pick a
agree.
number, if you were just to be like, hey, like I don't care about anything else. I don't care about how the form looks. I don't care about any. I just want a number. I think time form at bar like for me is the number. And yeah, that BC Turf came back at 126, and then he came back and fired a 123 and a 121 those next two races. So it's definitely a horse that has got that the capability to run a winning type effort here, which is what I'm looking for. And you're getting like fifth or sixth choice price here, 12-1 on a horse that I mean, finished second to Rebels Romance last time, obviously by I think by about 2 lengths. Um, but has run against very, very good horses. Obviously, we talked about August Rodin up to the mark, who's very, very good turf horse, and he finished third in that race with, like you said, with what could have been a winning ride if maybe he's able to kind of get to the rail and go. So definitely one I'm interested in, along with Rebels Romance, and then the third horse that I'll kind of highlight. Um, is going to be probably your third or fourth choice depending on what happens, and that's Luxembourg. I was about to say the number, but we don't have post positions yet. And Luxembourg is coming here for Aiden O'Brien, and he's an interesting horse in that he doesn't win a lot, but he runs very, very good races and good figures. I mean, we go back to last year, second to August Rodin by half a length at Leopardstown. Did win a nice race at the Curragh, going a mile and a quarter. Um, and did have a win at Epsom going the mile and a half. And once again, talking about figures, this is a horse that's consistently run 125s, 127, 128 in that range. And if he comes here in the US and is able to, you know, just get a couple more points, I think that he's right in there. I think 7 to 1 is probably a fair price. I mean, you weren't getting that. You usually don't get that good of a price on this horse, but there are no August Rodins in this race. I mean, Rebels
No.
Romance is the closest we have, and um, not to turn our nose up at Rebels Romance. Obviously, the horse has won what four or five starts this year, so the horse is doing just fine. But yeah, I think that there are going to be some alternatives here. I mean, I do think Rebels Romance is in here with a huge shot. What a surprise! But I definitely think that Luxembourg and Shariar, who you talked about a little bit, I think they both offer a bit of value.
Yeah, this is really going to be an interesting race, especially if Rebels Romance draws poorly, gets like a far outside post or something. It's really going to make this race interesting. Luxembourg is a horse that I think will probably be kind of forwardly placed. They're not going to be blazing by any means in this race up front. Even if there is a quote unquote rabbit or two. Um, and I think that one might be up front, and that might make the difference. I mean, that turf course out there at Delmar tends to get a little bit dry at times, and it gets fast up front, and it's hard to close. So Luxembourg might merit a really, really good shot, depending on how the turf course is playing. But I would anticipate it's going to be super fast.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about Aiden O'Brien and using rabbits, but Aiden O'Brien, I think, and I think even Chad Brown now has started to employ this, where when we say rabbit, we're not talking about a no hoper that
Right.
he's sending out there would like to go. I mean, we're talking, hey, this horse likes to be forwardly placed. We're entering him. He's going to go. He's going to set the pace, and he's got a shot to win, right? Although I could end up with egg on my face like Chase did when he picked a horse, and he's like, I like this horse, and the horse ended up being the rabbit, and he was just and Chase has famously tried to make the case for Thace numerous times in previous editions of shows we did. So if you guys don't remember, Thace was a Chad Brown horse that always looked like he was going to be lone speed, and then just
Collapse.
he just collapsed exactly. But anything else in this race you wanted to talk about, Barry?
No, I do think Emily Upjohn might get a little bit too much attention. Um, she's one of those horses that people know, and she definitely ran good back last summer. She was really, really sharp, and she just hasn't been back to that. Not saying that she couldn't reverse form here, and I think that's the idea because she kind of is coming back a little bit, but it seems like she likes it a little bit softer. A lot more give in the ground. She seems to run better, but you never know.
Yeah, and I will say, Mark always asks me for the horses my wife likes, because apparently she's just got this insane strike rate. I have a feeling that the woman who has a bunch of jewelry in the shape of the state of Illinois is going to like the horse Illinois here for Aiden O'Brien. I don't know. Once again, we're recording the pre-entry, so we don't know who's like drawn in yet. So I don't know if this is an AE or is not drawn in. My real concern with a horse like this is that it seems to have done its best running on soft and good ground. And um, you know, I did see, looking at the weather, and this is shocking, but allegedly it's supposed to rain this
Hmm.
week in Southern California.
Oh, wow.
So there could be a chance that we have at least some moisture in the ground, and maybe it's not a complete freeway, but it'll be interesting to see. But Mark, if you're watching, Illinois, Eve's gonna have money on it. I'm sure she's gonna text me to bet it while we're there at the Breeders' Cup. But yeah. Barry, thank you for jumping on. Obviously, you can check his stuff out at Urban Handicapper and obviously on the Notorious OTB. Once again, we'll be live tomorrow night, Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be covering the rest of the races. So let's make some money, guys.